start the practical application of pranayama. So one goes by force or discipline, so that's commonly known as hatha. One goes by free form with ease and self-pace, in tune with the laws of nature. So that's the approach given by the sage Vasishtha. So now you see, these are the two traditions. So one comes by firm discipline, and then one comes by your inner readiness. So when you are ready, you move on to the next level. Now, there is a saying that no force, no endurance or energy, na hatat, na balat. And then the other one is by practice, one can cross all the obstacles. So these are the two insights which we take, how this knowledge is applied traditionally. So now breathing and the respiratory system. So it encompasses two types of muscles, voluntary and involuntary muscles for respiration. So nose does filtering, warming, humidifying, sneezing, smell. Then the pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, lungs, alveoli, pleura. So it goes finer and finer into the lung structure. Now there are supportive breathing apparatus like diaphragm, intercostal muscle, the muscle between the ribs, lung itself. Then the apical or clavicular breathing, neck muscles and upper parts of the lung. Mid-sectional breathing or intercostal central part of the lung. Now basal or diaphragmatic breathing, so lower parts of the lungs. So you can see pretty much we can focus and then modify this lung activity by these pranayama techniques. And that's why they became more popular, because they also help us to stabilize the mind, calm the mind, and then also connect our mind body together. Now, this yogic breathing is inclusive of all these above things what we explored. So the upper part, middle part, lower part. Now, when we look at the breath rate, variability happens with age groups. So newborn versus toddler versus adult. Now the physiological breathing variability among gender, male versus female, abdominothoracic versus thoracoabdominal, that's another physiological variation. When we talk about breathing into the yoga, we always look at the yogic breath as essentially abdominal breath. Now let's do a small activity where we say, let's close eyes for a second and then think, what is your average breathing rate per minute? And then feel free to share it into your chat rooms. And then also, if you can, if you know, also share what's the normal breathing rate in your opinion per minute. So I always say that the people who are in Silicon Valley, they are so fast paced and hurry that everyone breathes around 32 per minutes. Our normal breathing is around 16 to 22 per minutes. That's right, Aparna. And then yogic breath is to reduce under 8 per minute. That's when we start really feeling all these physiological benefits. So the regulated breathing has a lot of benefits, as there is enhanced purposeful deep rest. So I see a lot of people, they are noticing that they're breathing slower and slower. Just every time you take a break, you notice a big change. Wonderful. Thanks for the answers. Now here is the physiological benefit from the pranayama. So pranayama is a connecting bridge, as we learn, between mind and body. So it enhances neuromuscular integration. So relaxation, that's the end product. So enhance oxygen supply, enhance nourishment of body cells, enhancement of the functions of various body systems such as respiratory and circulatory system, control modification of the breath with awareness like extended holding leads to slower heart rate with increased raise to the heart muscle. Based upon the technique's practice, the metabolism can be slowed down or accelerated in controlled manner, which has many therapeutic potentials. For example, fire breath. So Agnisar. So high aerobic activity versus alternate nostril, which has the calming influence. Now these help into improve digestion and elimination, uplifting effect on the mood and the emotions, deep sense of relaxation, calmness and positivity, sense of energization, and then lightness at the physical, mental, and emotional level. So these are just really few glimpses of this. Now, this is what happens into the meditation when we are into the deep states. The common symptom what we get is the natural lowering of the breath. Now, when we are at deep rest, you notice a lot of other things happen. And then obviously meditation is more effective than just sitting with closed eyes and resting. So let's look at the spiritual perspective of pranayama. So these are all the things which I have taken from the different traditions. So it gives you willpower to become a master of oneself, enhancement of flow of life energy, prana or chi, removal of obstructions which impede the flow of the prana, regulation of thoughts, desires and actions, cultivation of purpose of life. Now, pranayama removes the veil of illusion, maya, from the mind and helps self-illumination, says the Patanjali Yoga Sutra. Pranayama is extraordinary austerity. Having mastered pranayama in Padmasana, one is ready to become a liberated soul, says Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Pranayama removes fear of death, says Shiva Samhita. And we'll not go into the nadis and chakras, but then they are also very important part of the pranayama practice. So we'll just glance through one or two some commonly used practices. So it is a preparatory practice of pranayama, the Kapalbhati. And the highlight of this technique is forceful exhalation, passive inhalation. And this technique involves hyperventilation. In the initial phase, there is an increased sympathetic tone, which is followed by parasympathetic predominance, leading to deep relaxation and rest. So it also helps to clear sinuses and respiratory tract. So can be beneficial with asthmatics, chronic allergies, and it also gives massage to abdominal organs, obviously improving GI health. Now the precautions. So anybody who has exercise-induced asthma, blood pressure, severe stress, acute headache, migraines, epilepsy, who are menstruating, they should either do it gentle or totally avoid it for that certain amount of time. Another form of pranayam known as Bhastrika. This is advanced breathing technique, so that means it's not for everyone. It's a very high aerobic hyperventilation technique. It involves rhythmic forceful inhalation and exhalation. So the difference between the previous one, you see forceful exhalation but passive inhalation. Here they are both equal. So in cycles like 3, 5, 8, and 11, followed by the Ujjayi breath or the Kumbhaka, usually is repeated in sets of 3 or more cycles. Now this also creates initial sympathetic tone followed by parasympathetic response, resulting in deep relaxation. It also invigorates and energizes mind and body. When practicing this technique, many of the yogic traditions highly recommend following strict dietary guidelines and other yogic disciplines. So that means it's better to be learned and practiced through the proper mentor. Take it easy till get seasoned, as it can cause lightheadedness sometimes if you are not fully prepared. And the same precautions as we saw into the previous one. Now the alternate nostril, which is a very known and popular, so that called as Anulom Vilom, Nadi Shuddhi, Nadi Shodhana, these are the similar names. So this technique is known to create the equilibrium of sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So you exhale and inhale through left nostril and then switch nostrils That's one pattern, or exhale and inhale through right, one round. While practicing the technique, the exhalation is longer than inhalation. So what are the benefits? So it improves vitality, soothing and relaxing to the mind and body, removes the stress and anxiety, useful practice for spiritual progress because it creates a deep sense of calmness, tranquility, clarity, concentration, balance of energy channels, so Ida and Pingala Nadi. Now, precautions can be little tricky in the beginning to master the alternation of nostrils. Avoid any forceful inhalations if you have any sinus problems or headaches, especially if you know you have a chronic stress. Some seniors may find it difficult as they might forget the sequence, like where was I when I started? Possible difficulty with blocked nostrils or the condition called as deviated nasal septum. And then possible difficulty in practicing with somebody who has shoulder pain and then hand issues. Now the single nostril breathing, so it uses either left or right nostril to inhale. So those are called as Chandra Vedana and Surya Vedana based on which nostril we use. So the left nostril breathing is considered the feminine form. It's cooling, moon energy, known to reduce anxiety and can be possibly helpful with blood pressure. Supposed to be helpful for underweight and anorexia, so more of the mental challenges. Versus the right nostril is masculine sun energy, and it creates invigoration, energization of mind and body. And it also helps boost metabolism and weight reduction. So you can see they both have different effect into the practice and the outcomes. Now there is something called as sectional breaths. They are the Vibhagiya Pranayam. So they use all three, so called as clavicular Jeshta, thoracic Madhyama, abdominal the Kanishta, and then the full yogic breathing called as Brahma Mudra, and the sound with Om, and then the 5-dimensional breathing, inward, outward, sideways, forward, and backward. So these are certain practices which are typically part of the sectional breath. Now, benefits of these are simple preparatory practice. It helps create awareness about 3 lobes of the lungs. Its effect is more enhanced when mudras and chanting are used in side by side, and an enhancement with variations of energy with the hand. So because that mudras convey certain meaning. Now there are some cooling pranayam which actually creates cooling sensation into our bodies, called as Shitakari and Sadanta, where the tongue folded lengthwise, Shitakari tongue folded breathwise, and Sadanta teeth clench. So tongue and health are connected. So mental tranquility, so pacify anger, irritations, reactiveness, slows down metabolism, cools down Agni, the Pitta, the fire, known to reduce excessive heat and then obviously to reduce inflammation. Deep calming effect can be beneficial for hypertension, useful practice for people with seasonal allergies, especially for the summer season. And I found it somewhere, so I use this, that make sure your brain and tongue is connected before you start talking. So this connection is very powerful process. So the tongue is the most highly used muscle into our body, as you know. Then the Brahmari Pranayam, this technique uses creating a humming sound like a bumblebee while the tongue is touching to the upper palate, teeth apart. And during practice, one can modify the pitch, high pitch, low pitch. When it practices the larger group together, it has even enhanced effect. With creativity, one can practice it as a group first and then different variations in the group. So there is a lot of option for creativity. And then the soothing vibrations, they relax our mind. Now it's a very simple practice for voice culture. It improves the tonal quality of our voice, creates the depth, so can be useful for actors, singers, speakers, enhances the lungs, good for clearing sinuses, soothing headaches, migraines, asthma, hypertension, and then also helps with insomnia and anxiety. Now, heightened and pervasive awareness into the self and the universe, lot of scope to visualizations like imaging, different type of subtler sounds and variations, like birds and things like that. And then visions of different types called as Jyoti Darshan, experience at different mental states and levels, dissolution, merger of the mind in higher consciousness, and then Triputi means threefold processes of seer, seeing, and the seen, which is a very common description into the Vedic perspectives. And then finally, the state, the samadhi. So voice and the chanting called as Nadanusandhana. So chanting Om, but into the and then creating the Omkara. And there are certain advanced practices like Ujjayi, slow inhalation and exhalation with hissing at the throat level. Inhalation Ujjayi, exhalation Ujjayi, which is more common. Both inhalation and exhalation Ujjayi. And then something called as Murcha Pranayam, and then the Plavani called as floating. So these are all from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Now this is a simple technique called as Shanmukhi Kriya. So breathing from one nostril and exhaling from the same with the humming sound. Then you change to the other nostril and then you open both the nostril and then repeat. So that's how, so right, left, and then the both. Now we also look at the pranayama as a sadhana, as a deep spiritual practice. So self and universal awareness, creative intelligence, expansion of awareness, creativity, law of nature, so the creation, maintenance, and destruction, so the destruction of the darkness to the knowledge. And then it prepares one for samadhi by acting as a bridge between the mind and the body. So this is a typical daily routine from the yoga and Ayurveda perspective. So it shows us the good practices for yoga meditations are early morning and then also in the afternoon. So here is a quote by Swami Paramahansa Yogananda where he says that practicing yoga poses just as an exercise or meditation just for relaxation is like building a new beautiful home and then living on the porch. So here is the insight what we get from both yoga and Ayurveda. When we see strength in problems, we stop resisting stress and then use it as an impetus for eustress or a positive stress. When we learn to evoke the stay and play rather than the fight or flight response, one can live optimal healthy life. And that's the beginning of the first book of chapter of our life.